I had always believed that life was predictable, that if you worked hard, loved deeply, and stayed loyal, everything would naturally fall into place. I was wrong. It was supposed to be just another ordinary evening. I had finished work a little earlier than usual and decided to stop by a small cafe near my office. I wasn't looking for anything specific, maybe just a quiet moment before heading home. I pushed open the glass door, the soft chime above signaling my arrival, and immediately spotted her. My wife, sitting at a corner table with a man I had never seen before. At first, I hesitated. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just a casual meeting. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But the way she was leaning in, the way she smiled at him, the way he touched her wrist lightly as she laughed, it was unmistakable. My stomach dropped. My hands felt suddenly cold. The world around me blurred as a strange, suffocating weight settled in my chest. I didn't make a scene. I didn't march over and demand answers. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I pulled out a pen from my pocket, grabbed a napkin from the counter, and wrote 4 simple words. Don't come home tonight. My fingers trembled slightly as I walked up to their table. My wife, blissfully unaware, was still lost in whatever fantasy she was playing out with this stranger. I placed the napkin in front of her without a word. For the first time since I had arrived, she looked up, and the color drained from her face. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock, then something else. Guilt? Fear? Maybe both. The man across from her raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. I didn't give her a chance to explain. I turned around and walked out. The night air hit me like a wave, but it did nothing to clear the storm inside me. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My thoughts were a mess. Anger, disbelief, sorrow. They crashed into each other like a chaotic tide, pulling me under. How long had this been going on? Had I been blind all along? Was I nothing more than a fool? I closed my eyes and took a slow, shaky breath. I thought that was the worst moment of my life. I had no idea what was coming next. I sat in my car outside the cafe for what felt like an eternity. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest, my breathing shallow, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that I half expected the leather to tear under my fingers. My mind was a battlefield of emotions, rage, confusion, heartbreak, all colliding in a chaotic storm. A part of me wanted to turn back, to confront her right then and there, to demand an explanation. But another part, the more rational side, told me that I didn't need to hear a single word from her. I had seen enough. And yet, as I sat there, a terrible realization began creeping in. This wasn't just about the moment in that cafe. If she was willing to be that comfortable, that carefree with another man in public, how long had this been going on? How many other nights had she sat across from him like that? How many other times had she smiled at him the way she used to smile at me? A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an accident. This was planned. I needed to get out of there. I needed to clear my head before I did something I'd regret. So I turned the key in the ignition, and as the engine roared to life, I drove. Not home. Home wasn't home anymore. The silence was deafening. I found myself at a quiet parking lot near the waterfront, a place I used to go when I needed time to think. The city lights reflected in the dark water, shimmering like tiny, fragile hopes just out of reach. I pulled out my phone, my hands still shaking, and hovered my finger over her contact. I wanted to call her. I wanted to text her. I wanted to ask her why. But deep down, I already knew. She had made her choice long before I had walked into that cafe. The napkin had been my way of saying, fine. You made your bed. Now sleep in it. I locked my phone and leaned back in my seat, staring at the night sky, wondering how everything had unraveled so quickly. I thought about our life together. The mornings when she used to wake me up with a kiss. The long talks in bed, where we'd share our dreams, our fears, our future. The way she'd hold my hand in public, as if to tell the world she was proud to be mine. Had any of it been real? Had I been living in a lie this whole time? I felt something sting in the corner of my eye. No, I wasn't going to break down. Not yet. Not over her. I needed answers first. Her reaction, or lack thereof. An hour passed. Then another. Not a single call. Not a single message. Nothing. I expected anger. I expected pleading. I expected something. But the silence? The silence was worse. It meant she wasn't panicked. It meant she wasn't scrambling to explain herself. It meant that, at least in her mind, she wasn't afraid of losing me. That realization cut deeper than anything else. I checked my phone again. Still no messages. Fine. If she wasn't going to say anything, I would make it even easier for her. I typed out a single message. Your things will be outside the door by morning. I suggest you get them before the locks change. I stared at the screen for a moment before hitting send. And still, nothing. I clenched my jaw. She wasn't going to fight for me. She had already moved on. And that was when it truly hit me. Our marriage was over. What came next was beyond disgusting. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? By the time the first rays of sunlight broke through my window, I had packed up every single one of her belongings. Clothes, jewelry, makeup, everything that had once made our house feel like hers. I placed them neatly in a few suitcases by the door, each one feeling heavier than the last. I expected her to show up at some point. Maybe in tears, maybe with an apology, maybe even with some flimsy excuse. But when she finally arrived, it was nothing like I imagined. It was worse. She didn't come alone. She pulled up in his car. And she didn't even get out right away. Instead, she sat there, laughing. I stood at the window, watching in complete disbelief as she leaned in toward him, whispering something that made him smirk. It was like I didn't exist. Like I had never existed. Like the years we spent together had been wiped away in a single night. Something inside me shattered. This wasn't grief anymore. This was something else entirely. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I wasn't going to break. I wasn't going to let her win. So I did the only thing I could do. I walked outside, picked up her suitcases, and placed them next to the curb. And then, without saying a word, I turned around and walked back inside. She could have her new life. But she was never stepping foot in mine again. I closed the door behind me, my hands gripping the handle for a second longer than necessary. My heart was pounding, not out of fear, not even out of anger, just pure disbelief. I stood in my own home, staring at the suitcases outside through the peephole, watching as she finally stepped out of the car. Her movements were casual, as if she were picking up groceries, not collecting the remnants of what used to be our life. The man, her new man, stayed seated, completely at ease, his arm resting lazily over the wheel. He didn't bother to look my way, didn't feel the need to. She bent down to pick up her things, but before she could, she pulled out her phone and snapped a picture. I felt my stomach twist. What was she doing? Why would she take a picture? I had a horrible feeling I already knew the answer. Then, as if just to prove how little I mattered, she turned her phone around to show the guy in the car. He glanced at the screen, chuckled, and shook his head. Whatever she had told him, whatever sick, twisted narrative she had spun, it was all a joke to them. I gritted my teeth, my hands balling into fists. The air felt thick, suffocating. It wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It was the sheer audacity. She had broken our marriage, humiliated me, and now she was turning it into some kind of entertainment. I forced myself to step away from the door. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of reacting. I wasn't going to storm outside, demand answers, ask her why she did this to me. I was done playing the role of the clueless husband. Whatever game she was playing, she had already won. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down at the table, trying to steady my breathing. But no matter how much I tried to push it down, the anger kept bubbling back up. How had I let it get this far? How had I missed the signs? Were there signs? Or had she just become an entirely different person overnight? I had spent years loving her, trusting her, building a life with her. And now, what? I was nothing more than a punchline in some inside joke between her and a stranger? Minutes passed. Maybe longer. I wasn't sure. I heard the sound of the trunk opening, then closing. Then, the sound of the car door slamming shut. I expected them to drive off, for her to be gone from my life in the most anticlimactic way possible. But instead, my phone buzzed. A message. From her. I didn't want to look at it. But I did. You're embarrassing yourself. Be an adult. I stared at the screen, the words blurring together as my vision darkened. Be an adult? Embarrassing myself? I let out a bitter laugh. Of course, she wasn't even pretending to be sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't regretful. In her mind, I was the one overreacting. I should have ignored it. I should have deleted it and moved on. But I couldn't. Instead, I typed back, my fingers moving before my brain could stop them. You just lost a husband who loved you. I lost someone who didn't respect me. I think I came out ahead. I hit send and tossed my phone onto the table. It didn't matter. Nothing I said would make a difference. People like her didn't feel guilt. They just moved on to the next thing, the next thrill, the next temporary high. And yet, as I sat there, staring at the wall, I couldn't help but feel it, this gnawing, ugly feeling that I had been played from the very start. I thought back to the past year. Had she been pulling away? Had she been less affectionate? Had she been spending more time on her phone? There were moments, I realized, small moments that I had brushed off. Nights where she came home later than usual. Conversations where she seemed distracted. A look in her eyes that wasn't quite the same. I had ignored them all, convinced myself that every marriage had ups and downs, that love was enough to keep us together. But love wasn't enough. Not when respect was gone. The house felt unbearably empty. I stood up, pacing. What was I supposed to do now? Start over? Just forget that the woman I had shared my life with had discarded me like I was nothing? I felt lost. Adrift. Like I had been thrown into deep water without a life raft. Then, my phone buzzed again. Another message. You should know. I was going to leave anyway. I was just waiting for the right time. I exhaled sharply. That was it. The final nail in the coffin. She had never planned on fixing things. She had never even hesitated. The second she found something better, or at least, something new, she was ready to walk away. Something inside me settled. Not in a peaceful way, not in a way that felt good, but in a way that was final. I was done. I deleted the message. Then I deleted her number. I wasn't going to waste another second trying to understand her. She had made her choice. Now, I was making mine. But little did I know, this nightmare was far from over. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing in circles, replaying every moment of the past few days, trying to find the exact second my life had fallen apart. Maybe it had been crumbling long before I caught her in that cafe. Maybe I had just refused to see it. At some point, exhaustion won over, and I drifted into a restless, dreamless sleep. But it didn't last long. A loud knock at the door jolted me awake. I glanced at the clock, 6:27 a.m. Who the hell would be knocking at this hour? Still half asleep, I stumbled out of bed and made my way to the door. When I opened it, I felt my stomach turn. She was standing there. Not alone. 2 police officers flanked her on either side, their expressions unreadable. What is this? I asked, my voice groggy but laced with irritation. One of the officers, a tall guy with graying hair, cleared his throat. Sir, we need to have a word with you. I looked at her, my wife, if I could even call her that anymore. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She just looked smug. Like she had won something. I crossed my arms. About what? The other officer, a younger guy, glanced at her before speaking. Your wife is claiming that you threatened her last night when she came to pick up her things. I blinked. My brain struggled to process the words. I what? She sniffled dramatically, shifting on her feet. I don't feel safe. The words sent a fresh wave of fury through me. I didn't feel safe, knowing I had been sleeping next to a woman who could lie so effortlessly. I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't threaten her, I said, keeping my voice even. I put her things outside. She picked them up and left. That's it. The older officer nodded slowly, as if considering my words. Do you have any security cameras? I almost laughed. Of course, I did. I had installed them years ago, mostly for package theft, but suddenly, they were about to become the only thing standing between me and whatever insane narrative she was spinning. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through the footage, and held it up for them. There it was clear as day. Her pulling up, her laughing with him, her casually loading her suitcases into his car. Not a single moment of hesitation. Not a single sign of fear. The officers exchanged glances. One of them sighed. All right. Looks like there's no issue here. But before I could breathe a sigh of relief, she spoke again. He has cameras? She asked, her voice shifting, her expression darkening. That's creepy. He's spying on me. I clenched my jaw. They've been there for years. You know that. But she didn't care about logic. She was improvising, throwing whatever she could at the wall to see what would stick. The officers must have picked up on it because they looked less than convinced. One of them turned to her and said, Ma'am, if you feel unsafe, we can escort you somewhere, but there's no evidence of a crime here. She stiffened. She hadn't expected them not to take her side. I just want my husband to understand that he can't control me anymore, she said, her voice dripping with fake sadness. I exhaled, pushing my frustration down. I don't want to control you. I want you to leave me alone. Silence. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back to her car. The officers gave me a nod before following her, and I stood there, watching as she drove away, the tension in my chest refusing to fade. She was testing boundaries. pushing limits. And something told me this was only the beginning. I closed the door, locking it behind me. I had thought catching her in that cafe was the worst part of this nightmare. I was wrong. She wasn't just going to walk away. She was going to make sure she burned everything to the ground on her way out. I sat in my kitchen, the morning light cutting through the blinds, painting the floor in golden stripes. The silence in the house was heavier than ever. It wasn't comforting. It wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that pressed against my chest, suffocating me. I had just gotten a taste of what she was capable of. She wasn't satisfied with leaving. She wanted to destroy me in the process. And the worst part? I had no idea what she was planning next. I picked up my phone and stared at the screen. No messages. No missed calls. But I knew that didn't mean she was done. She was just getting started. I needed to protect myself. I spent the next few hours doing damage control. First, I backed up all the footage from my security cameras and made sure multiple copies were stored safely, one on my computer, another on a cloud drive, and a third on an external hard drive. I wasn't going to let her rewrite history. Then, I called a lawyer. I hadn't wanted to do it this soon, but after what happened that morning, I knew I had no choice. If she was willing to lie to the police, there was no telling what she'd try next. The lawyer, an older man named Curtis, listened carefully as I explained everything. He didn't interrupt, didn't react, just let me talk. When I finished, he let out a slow sigh. "You need to file for divorce immediately," he said. "And you need to document everything. Every interaction, every message, every call. If she tries to pull something, you'll need proof." I nodded, rubbing my temples. "What about the false report? I can file a complaint, but if the officers didn't press charges, it won't go far." He paused. "You need to be careful. Women like her? They don't like losing control. And if she feels like she's losing, she'll escalate." The words sent a chill down my spine. Escalate. I ended the call, feeling slightly better knowing I had legal backup. But deep down, I knew this was far from over. And I was right. Because later that evening, she showed up at my doorstep. The performance of a lifetime. I had just finished eating a microwave dinner, one of the first meals I'd eaten alone in years, when the doorbell rang. I checked the peephole and felt my stomach turn. It was her. But she looked different this time. Her makeup was smudged, her hair messy. She had on one of my old hoodies, the same one she used to steal from my closet and wear when she wanted to feel close to me. She looked broken. For a split second, I felt something stir in my chest. And then I remembered the way she had laughed in that car with him. I opened the door, but only halfway. "What do you want?" Her bottom lip trembled. "Can we talk?" I studied her, looking for the act. She was good, too good. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed it. "No," I said firmly. She flinched, as if I had hit her. "Please, just hear me out." I gritted my teeth, every instinct in me screaming don't let her in. But I wanted to hear what she had to say. Not because I believed her. Not because I wanted her back. Because I needed to know what her next move was. I stepped aside, letting her in. She walked past me, moving slowly, as if she were stepping into a place full of memories. I closed the door but didn't move closer. She turned to face me, tears pooling in her eyes. I made a mistake. I folded my arms. "Which one?" She let out a shaky breath. "All of it." I don't know what I was thinking. Her voice broke. I ruined everything. I watched her carefully. Every word felt rehearsed, every tear perfectly timed. "I miss you," she whispered. "I miss us." I exhaled through my nose, keeping my expression neutral. "Is that why you called the cops on me this morning?" For the briefest second, I saw it, the flash of annoyance in her eyes. The act slipped. But she recovered quickly, shaking her head. I was upset. I wasn't thinking straight. She stepped closer. "I don't want to fight. I just want a second chance." She reached for my hand. And I let her. Not because I wanted to, but because I wanted to see how far she'd go. She squeezed my fingers gently, her touch familiar, warm. I could see the gears turning in her head, the confidence growing as she thought she was getting to me. She thought she still had power over me. She was wrong. I slowly pulled my hand away. "I'm filing for divorce." She froze. For the first time, real panic flickered in her expression. "You don't mean that," she said quickly. "We can fix this." "No," I said. "We can't." Her breathing hitched. "So that's it? You're just throwing everything away." I let out a bitter laugh. "I'm throwing everything away?" I shook my head. "You did that the moment you sat across from him in that cafe." She swallowed hard, her body tensing. "I was going to tell you." "No, you weren't." Silence. Then, her entire demeanor changed. The tears? Gone. The soft, broken expression? Replaced by something cold, calculating. I saw the real her. And I knew in that moment she hadn't come here to apologize. She had come to test me. She wanted to see if I was still weak enough to let her back in. If she could manipulate me, just like she always had. But when she realized that wasn't happening, she went for the only thing she had left. Her voice dropped, low and venomous. You'll regret this. I didn't blink. I already regret ever loving you. She inhaled sharply, her face twisting with rage. And then she turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door, my heart hammering in my chest. I should have felt relieved. But all I felt was dread. Because I knew one thing for certain. She wasn't done with me yet. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the house long after she had left. I stood there, staring at it, my entire body tense, every muscle wound tight. I should have felt some kind of satisfaction, some sense of closure. But instead, all I felt was exhaustion, deep, bone-crushing exhaustion. She was lying. She had always been lying. And now that she knew I was serious about cutting her out of my life, she had shifted to a new strategy, one that had nothing to do with guilt or regret and everything to do with control. I walked back to the kitchen and poured myself a drink. My hands were steady, but my mind was racing. She had made it clear I would regret this. That meant she wasn't walking away quietly. I needed to be ready. By the time I finished my drink, my phone buzzed. I expected it to be her. Another desperate attempt to get under my skin, another manipulative message designed to keep me emotionally hooked. But it wasn't. It was a text from an unknown number. You're making a huge mistake. Fix this before it's too late. I exhaled sharply, my grip tightening around the glass. Who the hell was this? I typed back a single word. Who is this? No response. I stared at the screen, the anger inside me growing. She was getting people involved now. Friends? Family? The guy from the cafe? Who knew? But one thing was clear, she wasn't just going to disappear from my life quietly. Fine. Let her play whatever game she wanted. I was done playing. I put my phone down and went straight to my laptop. If she was trying to turn this into a battle, I was going to make sure I had every weapon at my disposal. First, I emailed my lawyer, summarizing everything that had happened. I attached screenshots of the text messages, the security footage from the night before, and even the false police report she had filed. Then, I changed all my passwords: email, banking, social media. If she was desperate enough, I wouldn't put it past her to try something reckless. Finally, I pulled up my security system's live feed and checked the cameras. Everything was normal. No suspicious cars, no signs of her lurking nearby. But something in my gut told me she wasn't done. And I was right. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of notifications. My phone had been blowing up all night. Voicemails, texts, emails. I scrolled through them, my stomach turning. Some were from mutual friends, people I hadn't spoken to in months, suddenly reaching out with vague messages like, "Hey man, are you okay? I heard about what happened. This isn't you. Call me when you can. We need to talk." What the hell was she telling people? I didn't have to wonder for long. Because when I checked social media, I found the answer staring me right in the face. She had posted about me. Not directly. She hadn't used my name. But the message was clear. A long, tearful post about how she had been emotionally trapped in a toxic marriage for years. How she had finally found the courage to leave. How she was now being harassed and stalked by her controlling, possessive ex-husband who couldn't handle losing her. And the comments? They were exactly what she wanted. "You're so strong for walking away. I'm so sorry you went through this. No woman deserves that. Stay safe. He sounds dangerous." I felt my jaw tighten. Dangerous? This woman had cheated on me, lied to the police, and now she was painting me as the villain? I should have expected it. I should have been prepared. But seeing it laid out like that, watching her turn my pain into some kind of heroic survival story, it made my blood boil. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think. If I reacted emotionally, if I lashed out, she would win. She wanted me to lose control. She wanted me to do something she could use against me. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I did something she didn't expect. I stayed silent. I didn't post a response. I didn't text her. I didn't call our mutual friends to set the record straight. I let her talk. And while she was busy spinning her story, I was making sure I had all the proof I needed for the real fight, the divorce. The last straw. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. The social media drama eventually died down. People moved on, distracted by the next big thing. And just when I started to think she had finally given up, she proved me wrong. Because 3 nights later, I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. It was 2:14 a.m. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something told me to pick up. I answered, pressing the phone to my ear. Hello. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, a quiet breath. And then, laughter. Low. Slow. Familiar. Her. My grip tightened around the phone. What do you want? She didn't answer. She just kept laughing, soft at first, then louder, as if something about this was funny. Then, finally, she spoke. You really think you're safe? A chill ran down my spine. Before I could respond, the call ended. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding. She was done playing games. This was something else. Something worse. I didn't sleep after that call. How could I? My ex-wife, because that's all she was to me now, had crossed a new line. Up until now, everything had been manipulative but predictable. The cafe encounter, the police stunt, the fake social media narrative, they were all desperate moves, but they were still moves I could counter. But this? Calling me in the middle of the night, laughing like some kind of psychopath, whispering threats? It was something else entirely. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone still in my hand, staring at the black screen as if expecting it to light up again. A sick feeling twisted in my stomach. I needed to do something. This couldn't go on. By the time the sun started creeping through the blinds, I had already decided on my next step. I called Curtis, my lawyer, first thing in the morning. The moment he picked up, I launched into everything. Her social media slander, the midnight phone call, even the unknown text I had received earlier. I expected some kind of reaction, maybe a concerned pause or even mild surprise. But he just sighed. This is textbook, he said. She's trying to break you down, make you react. She wants you to be the villain. Don't give her anything she can use. I clenched my jaw. She's already making me the villain. People are eating up her lies like she's some kind of victim. Let her, he said simply. She's playing the long game, but what she doesn't realize is that people lose interest quickly. They move on. She'll either escalate or give up when she realizes she's not getting the reaction she wants. Escalate. The word made my skin crawl. What should I do? I asked. Block her. Block every unknown number. Change your locks if you haven't already. And if she contacts you again in any way, document it. Don't engage. Just build a case. It wasn't the satisfying answer I wanted, but it was the smart one. I had to play the long game too. After I ended the call, I immediately followed his advice. I blocked her number, every unknown number that had messaged or called me, and then went online and updated all my passwords again just in case. I even called my security system provider and upgraded my settings, making sure every corner of my property was covered. I refused to let her get to me. And for a few days, it worked. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. The breaking point. I should have known she wasn't the type to stay silent for long. It was a Friday night when everything came crashing down. I had just gotten home from work, mentally drained but relieved that the week was over. I was planning to order takeout, watch something mindless, and pretend, even if just for a few hours, that my life wasn't a complete disaster. But as I pulled into my driveway, my stomach dropped. There was a car parked out front. Her car. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. My first instinct was to back up and leave, go stay at a hotel for the night, avoid whatever insanity she was about to bring. But no, I was done running from her. I parked and stepped out, keeping my posture relaxed, controlled. If she was expecting an angry confrontation, she wasn't getting it. She was sitting on the hood of her car, legs crossed, cigarette between her fingers. She never smoked before. Was this a new habit, or was it just part of the act? She smiled when she saw me. Not the warm, familiar smile I used to love. This was something else. Cold. Calculated. I was wondering when you'd get home, she said. I exhaled through my nose, ignoring the way my pulse picked up. What do you want? She tilted her head, studying me like I was some sort of puzzle she was still trying to figure out. You blocked me. I didn't answer. She slid off the hood, taking slow steps toward me. You've been ignoring me. That's not very nice. I held my ground. I don't owe you anything. Her expression darkened for half a second, but then the smile returned, as if she found the whole situation amusing. You're so dramatic. You act like I killed someone. You killed our marriage, I said flatly. That's enough. She sighed, shaking her head. You always were a little too emotional. That's why she stopped herself, but I knew what she was about to say. That's why I cheated. I almost laughed. That's what she wanted me to believe. That I was the problem. That I had driven her to do it. It was classic manipulation, an attempt to rewrite the past in a way that made her the victim and me the flawed, unlovable husband. I wasn't buying it. Whatever you came here for, you're not getting it, I said, walking past her toward my front door. Leave. She grabbed my arm. I froze. The contact was brief, just a second, but it was enough to send every nerve in my body into high alert. I turned my head slowly, meeting her gaze. She wasn't smiling anymore. I don't like being ignored, she said, her voice lower now, almost a whisper. I shook her hand off. That's not my problem. For a moment, I thought she might snap. Do something reckless. But then she exhaled sharply, stepping back, running a hand through her hair as if composing herself. Fine, she muttered. I just wanted to see you one last time anyway. I didn't take the bait. I walked inside without another word, locking the door behind me. I leaned against it, heart hammering in my chest. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Because when I checked my phone an hour later, I saw the new social media post she had just uploaded. A picture of her standing in front of my house. Caption: You can block me, but you can't erase me. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. She wasn't leaving. She was just getting started. I stared at the screen, my ex-wife's latest stunt glaring back at me like a warning. She was making a statement. She wasn't going away quietly. She wanted control, attention, power. And when she didn't get it, she escalated. But this time, I didn't panic. I didn't feel that same anger clawing at my chest. Because I finally understood something. She didn't matter anymore. She could take as many pictures in front of my house as she wanted. She could post whatever fake sob story she wanted online. She could call me a villain, paint herself as the victim, drag my name through the mud. But in the end, none of it mattered. Because I wasn't playing her game anymore. She had spent years making me believe I needed her. That I was nothing without her. That if I ever lost her, my life would fall apart. And yet, here I was, still standing. I locked my phone and set it face down on the table. I wasn't going to waste another second thinking about her. Letting go. That weekend, I took the first real step toward moving on. I packed up every last thing that reminded me of her, old photos, gifts, little souvenirs from trips we had taken together. The memories weren't painful anymore. They weren't anything at all. They were just things. And I didn't need them. I threw them into a box and drove straight to a donation center. As I handed over the box, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, relief. This was my life now. My fresh start. When I got home, I sat on my couch, taking in the silence, not the heavy, suffocating silence I had felt after she left, but a new kind. A peaceful kind. I finally had space to breathe. A future without her. Days passed. Then weeks. And for the first time in years, I felt good. I started going to the gym again, picking up old hobbies I had abandoned while I was too busy trying to hold our marriage together. I reconnected with friends I had drifted away from. I started living again. And the best part? She was fading into the background. Sure, she still tried to provoke me. Another dramatic post here, another text from an unknown number there. But I didn't care anymore. She wasn't my problem. Then, one morning, I woke up to an email from my lawyer. Finalized. You're officially divorced. I sat there for a moment, staring at the words, letting them sink in. And then I smiled. Not a bitter smile. Not a sad one. A real, genuine, free smile. I had one. Not in the way she played the game. Not in the petty, toxic way she wanted to battle. I had one because I had walked away with my peace. Because I refused to let her control my emotions anymore. Because I chose myself. The last goodbye. Months later, I ran into a mutual friend, someone who had been close to both of us during the marriage. We talked for a bit, catching up, and then, as expected, her name came up. She's not doing too well, they said. I think she regrets everything. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel anger. I just felt nothing. And that's how I knew I was free. As I walked away from that conversation, the sun warm on my face, the city buzzing around me, I felt something new. Something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. My life wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, I was going to live it for me.